And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Hello, I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan, and this is your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook on this Wednesday, August 6th, 2025. And starting with the sea ice, it continues to melt off here in the Arctic coast, Beaufort Sea coastline from Utqiagvik to west of Kaktovik. And we are in that kind of final stretch of late summer. Between now and about the third week of September will be the minimum ice extent. So even though temperatures are going to be cooling down a bit across areas of the north and west as we go through the weekend and next week. So some of the melting may not be as pronounced as it has been at times the past couple of weeks. And looking at the satellite image as of this mid-afternoon Wednesday, we have a ridge of high pressure like this from the North Pacific up into South Central. Areas that are seeing sunshine have 70-plus degree temperatures, a few isolated 80-degree readings, not out of the question. But here's what we're watching now. There's a couple areas of low pressure. Main one is sitting here just northwest of on Alaska, and that low is going to slide southeastward across the lower Alaska Peninsula here as we go through later tonight and early on Thursday. And this front that is lifting slowly northeastward is producing some gale force winds along it with bands of moderate to locally heavier rainfall. And that heavier rain is working its way from around Chiknik on up through Shelikof Strait, Kodiak Island. Some areas, generally an inch or two of rain will be pretty common, but some of the heavier rainfall could be on the order of 3 to 4 inches, especially when you factor in southeasterly flow going up along that coastal terrain. So here's what we have on the map for Thursday. Low crossing the lower Alaska Peninsula, occluded front pushing up into the Gulf. There's going to be some stronger gale force winds along this front. And then in the interior, we have stationary front, but as this piece of energy coming out of the eastern Russia, Gulf of Anadyr, slides east-southeastward, it's going to pull down cooler air Friday into Saturday, and that's going to begin the pattern change. It's actually, we're seeing the emergence of an early fall pattern starting this weekend into next week, and that'll carry on through mid-month. No changes foreseen once we get into this. So for Friday, we have a secondary low coming out of the North Pacific, atmospheric river, a lot of moisture with it, taking aim toward the southeast portion of the state. Panhandle could pick up some moderate to locally heavy rain Saturday into Sunday. And then you have this system coming up like that. You have this one over here with cooler air driving southward. And that's what's going to allow things to really shift out and cool down, especially the western two-thirds of the state here later this weekend and early next week. So for the inner channels, Thursday, south winds 10-15 knots, waves 2-3 feet. Outer coast, stronger winds off of Port Alexander, Sitka. Look for south-southeast winds and then becoming easterly, increasing to 35-knot gales by the time you get out there to Cape Suckling. And on Friday, those winds come down as that front weakens to a trough, and we have southeast winds 15 to 20 knots, but 3 to 4 foot waves for the inner channels here, whereas for the outer channels, south winds 10-15 knots south of Sitka off of Prince of Wales Island. Waves there 5-6 feet, and then southeast winds turning easterly to 20 knots around Cape Suckling, but down quite a bit from what they were on Thursday. So here is the setup with that front lifting northeastward right along and ahead of the front. Easterly winds, 35-knot gales here, Kayak Island to Hinchinbrook entrance along the eastern Kenai coast, northeast winds to 35 knots, and northeast to east winds 35 to 40 knots, lower Cook Inlet, Kamishak Bay, and also just northeast of Kodiak Island, where waves could be as high as 13, 15 feet. East winds 25 knots within Prince William Sound, so waves running 5-6 feet there as well. Winds will come down across the region on Friday. Look for east winds 15 knots within Prince William Sound, waves 2-3 feet. Outside of Hinchinbrook entrance, southeast winds to 15 knots, 7 to 8 foot waves, turning easterly along the eastern Kenai coast as we come down Cook Inlet, northeast to north winds from Anchorage down to off of Anchor Point, 3 to 4 foot waves, but easterly winds there out of Homer into Kamishak Bay at 20 knots with 4 to 5 foot waves. For Thursday, that low is crossing right down here, lower Alaska Peninsula, so light variable winds only around 10 knots, but ahead of it, southerly winds of 15 knots across Kodiak Island and east of Chiknik, southeast winds to 15 knots, Bristol Bay, the strongest gale force winds Thursday will have lifted further north, as I showed you up there along areas outside of Hinchinbrook Entrance. And then for Friday, winds generally variable across a good portion of the Alaska Peninsula. Northeast winds 15 knots, Shelikof Strait, and 10 knots out of Bristol Bay, turning northwesterly 15 knots either side Cold Bay and False Pass. Winds will generally be northeasterly across the Aleutian chain, near 15 to 20 knots on Thursday. So winds have come down considerably. And then again on Friday, generally look for northeasterly wind or northwesterly winds, at 20 knots across the Aleutian chain, and again, waves generally 5-6 feet across a good stretch of that. Thursday's winds will be easterly within Bristol and Kuskokwim Bays, waves a couple of feet. Northeast winds out of Norton Sound, that wider expanse between Nome and Kotlik, could be northeast to 25 knots with 4-foot waves, and then the lower Yukon coast northeasterly winds 15 knots or so with waves of 2 to 3 feet. Those winds turn northerly, St. Matthew to St. Paul, right around 15 to 20 knots, 6 to 7 foot waves. And on Friday, winds will be northwest 20 knots, St. Paul and up through St. Matthew with 5-foot waves. Along the southwest coast, northeast winds out of Bristol Bay at 10 knots, northwest winds within Kuskokwim Bay at 10 knots with waves a foot or so. And then along the lower Yukon coast, northwest winds to 10 knots, 2 to 3 foot waves, and south winds up there across Norton Sound, because there is going to be a front driving southeastward and kind of a weak low circulation in this region. And then coming through the Bering Straits, first west side of the Seward Peninsula, Wales, Port Clarence, as well as Gamble, Savunga, north winds to 20 knots, waves highest 6-7 feet on the north side of St. Lawrence. Lower Chukchi Sea, north winds 15 knots on Thursday, as we strongest 25 knot northeast winds coming around Cape Lisburne. And then as we get up along the Beaufort Sea coast, north to east winds 5 to 10 knots, waves just a foot or two. And for Friday, generally east winds 10 knots along the Beaufort Sea coast, Kaktovik to Utqiagvik, with waves running a foot or two. And then as we come down through the Chukchi Sea, northeast winds turn northerly coming around Cape Lisburne and Point Hope. And look for north winds of 20 knots all the way down through the lower Chukchi Sea through the Bering Strait, waves generally running 4 to 5 feet on Friday.